Sewer workers dive underground.
When it rains, it's bad because this is a storm drain. I have 15 minutes to save myself.
Safety is also a top priority at the nuclear power plant.
This is radioactive waste. In case of doubt, they can also stop any work if it's dangerous.
Treehouse builders aim high.
Sharp edges, warm glass. It weighs 200 kilos.
Since 2019, the Brunsbüttel nuclear power plant has been undergoing dismantling. Together with several hundred colleagues, chemist Katja Hinz makes sure that later only green meadows can be seen at this site.
I had already worked in a control area in my doctorate, so I knew the whole procedure with going in and changing. But I went through the plant the first day with a very experienced colleague and looked at everything, and we really walked around everywhere, and he told me everything. And as I said, of course I knew how a nuclear power plant works roughly. But to walk past the systems, to say the pipe, this ran through here, this happened here, I found that quite exciting. And then you get used to it relatively quickly. At the very beginning I got lost a few times, but that doesn't happen to me anymore.
Katja Hinz is in charge of the release section. Every part that's removed here must be measured for radiation before it is allowed to leave the controlled area.
One of the points is, of course, clear, safety clothing. You always notice the difference. You come in from outside and you're somehow immediately in a different mood because you change clothes and so on. And that's definitely different. Then, of course, the plant is relatively old. For me, it always looks pretty outdated. Because many things in nuclear power plants were built very precisely and were then left as they were. Of course, you're always asked a lot of questions. What it's like to work in a nuclear power plant. Are you scared? And those things. But our plant is very clean.
The nuclear power plant had been in operation since 1977 and was permanently decommissioned in 2011. It took another 8 years before dismantling could begin. Together with colleague Henning, Katja checks how the demolition work on the reactor core is going.
We're in the process of cutting the core barrel in the cutting bin. We've just converted from vertical cut to horizontal cut. And it looks like we're already in the process of harvesting the first cut pieces. We're going to grab them with the grabber. And then we place them in the cutting bin. We'll place them there until we have the appropriate insert magazine, in which we will then pack the cut pieces.
And are there any residuals for me?
I don't know. Are you taking over the saw blades?
We'll have to take a look. We'll talk about it.
The nuclear power plant is being dismantled from the inside out. The fuel elements were removed right at the beginning and are waiting to be transported to the final storage facility. In the past, the reactor pressure vessel, the heart of the power plant, was located under this work area. The former decay basin protects against radioactivity during dismantling. In the red plant, the fuel rods used to be changed.
That's radioactive waste. This is what goes into the final repository. It makes up very little in the entire power plant. It's 2 to 3% of the total mass, but it's the construction site with the most activity and therefore, of course, a lot of remote control, a lot of safety precautions, very elaborate. When I started here, the construction site had not yet been built. We still had the intact reactor. The fuel elements had already been removed, but nothing had been cut. And now you can see the progress, how more and more is cut.
Henning Binas is responsible for dismantling the core internals. The bridge was specially installed for the demolition work so that the experts have a safe place to work. When it was built 50 years ago, no thought was given to deconstruction.
All our sawing equipment has to work underwater, and that's actually the big challenge. You can't go straight to it. You always have to see that it's somehow solved during the handling. We have good cameras, so we can get good pictures from underwater as well. Here you can look in very nicely right now, but further down in the RPV, it's a few meters deeper. Then, at some point, you can't see it anymore, and there the camera helps a lot. So I would say that the challenge is to have the dismantling equipment running in such a way that we are constantly producing small parts.
The dismantling is expected to take 15 years and cost about €1 billion.
What I find very interesting is that we are responsible for quite a lot here. So, of course, it's also a bit of my process. I have a large team, and we all work closely together. But it's also our process that we are proud of, when we say, okay, we've done that now. We also see the difference from how it looked 3 years ago, how much we have already deconstructed, that it's progressing. And that is definitely exciting. And you can also contribute a lot of ideas. On the other hand, you also bear a lot of responsibility. You have to be aware of that, too.
Up to 9,000 tons of radioactive waste will be generated here. Quite different waste arrives in the sewers in Kassel. The sewer system of the city in northern Hesse is 825 kilometers long. Every underground sewer must be inspected, cleaned and maintained. Benny Drossel and his colleagues take care of that.
At the beginning it was really very special because you haven't seen anything like it before. It smells a little strange, but you get used to it and it's actually like any other job.
In most cases, the canal workers no longer have to climb down themselves. Here they do. A so-called rake has to be cleaned. Thorsten Röhn goes into the control room and makes sure that he and his colleagues downstairs can work safely.
Now I turn on the station walk and the light. Here we see it's 15 centimeters of water level. What we hear right now is the rake. Now it's off. And now we turn off the rakes.
Climbing down immediately would be life-threatening because toxic or explosive gases could be waiting for the sewer cleaners below. To check whether the atmosphere in the culvert is safe, Alex lowers a gas detector. It takes just a few minutes to get the results. While the gas detector does its job, the men take care of further security measures.
This is our height safety device. If we fall, there's a lock right there, and we don't fall any lower.
The only thing missing is the right clothing.
Should we get into contact with bacteria, feces, then we don't have it on our normal clothes, but on this suit. Because you get back into the car with your normal clothes.
Thorsten and Benny climb into the culvert in pairs. The third colleague stays upstairs and keeps watch. The men can always rely on each other.
You have to enjoy your work. And that's why it's so important to have a colleague who is a good fit, who can be counted on and who can be trusted.
Then it's downhill for the man, well secured. A culvert is a pressure pipeline under a river or a road. This structure crosses under the Fulda River. Thorsten receives his colleague downstairs.
Hello, Rudy.
The gas detector stays down all the time.
This can also happen in a rainwater channel. Simply through leaves, through deposits, through mud, this sulfur substance comes up. And if we now run through there and swirl that up, suddenly the dangerous atmosphere can then be summoned. And also due to the excrement and everything that lies in the canal, you also have the putrid gases, and they do not smell good and are also explosive. That's why everything in the canal is explosion-proof.
This means protected against explosion.
Can go up again.
Benny secures his colleague who ventures to the rake. The system is designed to catch rags or larger waste before they clog the culvert.
I now operate the right catch in the back and crank that up now.
That way Torsten can get to the rags better. Twice a week the sewer workers have to clean the rake to keep the plant clear. A clogged system would significantly increase the cleaning effort. Besides, it only really starts to stink when the water no longer drains away. For Benny Drosse, the location under the city took some getting used to at first.
When I started here, I always put my deodorant pretty close up here to the collar. And when it was really unpleasant, I turned my nose to the deodorant smell. But in the meantime, I got used to it. If I were to work as a florist now, for example, and would smell flowers, that would also be more intense for me than for the florist.
Today, dirt and stench are kept within limits. The rake is not always as clean as it is today. The canal workers are particularly concerned about the many rags in the culvert. Annoying for Benny and his colleagues, because this kind of pollution would actually be avoidable.
These are wet wipes, pads and tampons from the ladies, etc. And that does not belong in the toilets or in the sewage system. That accumulates here, and it's not like toilet paper that dissolves, and that's why we have a lot of problems with it in the rake here, because it keeps accumulating here. So those are actually the main problems, that cosmetics end up in the toilet.
After just a few minutes, Torsten is finished with the cleaning.
Switch on the rake.
The rake is switched on again from above. The men are done here. The water flows again.
If there was a lot of rain, then far more material arrives. And then it settles in front of the rake in such a way that we sometimes have problems with the hook. So we really have to use a crowbar. It gets stuck there, also due to the water pressure. But today it's smooth, super. That's how it should always be.
Hygiene is something the men take particularly seriously.
We have a great slogan. Your job is our business.
The rake cleaning was just the first job for the men today. Now it's on to the next job site. In Anweiler in Rhineland-Palatinate, a hotel is building a new seminar room, a kind of treehouse on stilts. Several trades work hand in hand to ensure that the X-shaped stilt house is quickly ready for occupancy. The carpenters take care of the ceiling formwork.
Pull over. Good.
Later, the boards are stapled. The glue should hold the board even if the clamps fail. The carpenters have already reached the middle, but the next board doesn't really want to fit.
I'll chime in here. This is the typical demonstration effect. It has to be tilted a little. That's the demonstration effect now. Now we've practiced for 3 days, and then something like this.
Site manager Bernd Hook gets to the bottom of it.
At the moment, we have the problem that the groove doesn't fit into the spring. This can have various causes, that something is jammed, something has broken off. We're currently investigating this. You take a whack at it. Yep, now here. Exactly.
That looks better, but the board is still not properly in position. This is because the formwork part protrudes a little at the edge, and on the other side the joint doesn't close. But the man can't get the stubborn board into the right place. This is due to the fact that the window element has not yet been installed.
Because it's not fixed yet. Now we still have to attach the transverse joint. And here we have the problem that the window element is not yet completely fastened. That means we now have to somehow push the strip over here. The problem is that it bends away as soon as I start up there. You'd need a parquet iron. Do you have something like a parquet iron to hang it on? You don't? No? This is of no use to us. Rüdiger, we have to take it out again.
Window fitter Peter Kopp lends a hand without further ado. The window element gives way when the carpenters try to push the board to the side.
This is of no use, it has to come out. That's the problem now, that the window element is just not fixed yet. And we have to press this bar and it doesn't work as we imagined. Now we temporarily fix the window to the ceiling edge.
Peter doesn't flinch for long, and so the man can start a new attempt. Will it work this time?
Go for it! I'll go like this. Right. Now the joint is closed. Rüdiger, is the joint closed? Yes? And that solves the problem. Screw out again. There you go.
In Kassel, sewer workers have reached their second job site of the day. The men want to inspect a sewer. In the past, the profession was a classic job for career changers. In the meantime, pipe, sewer and industrial service specialist has become an apprenticeship. Here, the wastewater technicians have their own height safety device with them. Moreover, the men do not go into the canal without their so-called self-rescuer.
You can hang it around your neck like this. When we go into the manholes, go outside the shaft and move away into the inlet or outlet of a large walk-in pipe. If the gas warning device strikes, because there's a dangerous atmosphere, then I open that up. There's an oxygen cartridge in there, and then I'm supplied with oxygen for 15 minutes. So I have 15 minutes to move out of the shaft and save myself.
Then the men go underground through the manhole.
Next, please.
Many shaft inspections are now done with cameras. That's not possible here, because here the men want to perform maintenance. So Benny and Torsten have to go down themselves, always under the watchful eye of colleague Alex.
Everything okay?
Good.
The men want to look at the general condition of the structure. They can use a tablet to record possible defects. On this occasion, the channel workers remove rubber spacers that are no longer needed but are in the way.
Now we have to walk with a rolling gait, otherwise our feet get wet.
If the state of construction is not in order, for example, sewage could leak. It's also important for your own safety down here in the canal that even minor defects are quickly corrected. The canal was built in 1979.
This is a concrete pipe, and there's also iron in it to stabilize. And then we have corrosion here, for example. And we make sure that they are not too big, that the spots are not leaky, that no groundwater enters, because that's external water and we have to clean the external water. In other words, the more groundwater we get into the sewers, the more the treatment plant has to clean. And of course, we try to avoid that.
The canal workers are keeping an eye on this spot. However, there is no need for action here yet. Benny is a trained bricklayer. In the past, that often meant short-time work in the winter. That's a thing of the past. The profession of wastewater technician is safe and a year-round job.
It's generally not so bad here. It's a nice, I say funny atmosphere because of the acoustics. But the temperatures down here are good. In the summer it's cool, in the winter it's warm. And if it's freezing upstairs, it's really pleasant down here. When it rains, it's bad here. because this is a rainwater channel, and of course it's full then.
Benny reaches the rainwater overflow and thus the end of the canal section.
And once we're down here, we'll take a quick look in here at the firing structure. But it looks very good.
Colleague Thorsten also takes a close look at the old building. Cracks, leaks, washed out grout. Nothing escapes the man. In the event of damage or heavy contamination, the sewer workers respond immediately. Today, that's not necessary. And so the men are satisfied. This channel is in very good condition.
Hello. Are we at the right place? North Bus Station?
Back in Brunsbüttel, Katja hints on her way to the processing of residual materials. Here, everything that was once part of the nuclear power plant is decontaminated and dismantled. The pieces are divided into so-called nuclide vectors. Nuclides indicate the sort of atoms, so to speak.
We have a medium-sized saw here. There are different saws available. The very large saw is currently not in operation. The saw may only be used for this nuclide vector. And if we have another one, then everything must be cleaned. Then there's a stop and the saw bands are changed or cleaned, and the entire area here is also properly cleaned by the radiation protection team.
The parts are crushed so that Katja's colleagues can later measure them free without any problems. Safety is a top priority when sawing.
What's important here is work safety concerning the subject of cuts. That's why we now also see that the colleague is wearing these gauntlets. They are very important. It's necessary that the work clothes are worn, including this apron, which is a cut protection apron, and the gauntlets and gloves, and that they also seal well. Because the most dangerous thing is that you accidentally reach into this saw band or maybe slip off. The radiation itself is not a danger. The colleagues wear gloves anyway, and in the evening the hands are washed. It would only be dangerous if someone really cuts himself, and then perhaps on a not quite freshly decontaminated piece. But we can also rule that out with the work clothing, which is then really well sealed.
Only what exceeds a prescribed radiation limit is sent to the final repository. Everything else is to be measured free and ideally recycled.
What mining display do you have here today? We see here at the boxes. This is all precisely labeled.
Everywhere on the demolition site, radiation is measured to establish a safe working atmosphere.
They would then sound the alarm. But since the things have already been decontaminated beforehand, it's actually relatively clean. That is, we have very little here. On this floor, we actually have no real radiation, which we control all the time. We have the dosimeter, and we suck up these small particles, the steel particles and chips, and what comes up during sawing.
A total of 300,000 metric tons of deconstruction waste will be generated. Many kilometers of pipelines have to be disposed of. The crushed building material is stored in so-called skips.
Here we have a green skip which tells me the material is processed. The material is decontaminated and can now go on into the process. We can now take a look here to see if there's anything in it. You can actually touch these skips because they are really clean. And you can see now how clean and neatly cut the material is. It has been completely stripped of paint, completely decontaminated and cut into small pieces.
Next stop for the parts, radiation measurement. In Annweiler, only the sunshine is radiant. Several trades work together on a stilt house for a hotel. After initial difficulties, the carpenters are making increasingly good progress with the slab formwork.
What's that now?
The constant work overhead is not easy, especially today.
There you go. Well, we have 16 meters of formwork to do here at over 35 degrees. That's not exactly fun, but we have to do it.
Nicht gerade lustig, ja. Aber da muss man durch.
A treehouse architect from Bremen has designed the unusual object. Not the first collaboration with site manager Bernd Hook. The carpenter has already built such a house. For Bernd and his colleagues, however, this is anything but a routine construction site.
The construction site has a few special challenges. You can see it. The oval is not our everyday work. It also has to be accurate for the window fitters. From a wood construction point of view, you have to work to within half a centimeter, and that's a matter of precision.
Just how exact the carpenters have worked can now be seen, because the window fitters are also already there.
Okay, we'll take that first.
The window fitters want to do the glazing on the front today. The panes are not going in yet. First, the craftsmen have to align the window elements exactly so that they stand straight.
It's also exhausting, it's true, especially when glazing in these temperatures. We're dealing here with pane weights of around 100 to 140 kilos. This pane, which is a model pane, weighs around 200 kilograms, and unfortunately, we have no way of working with assistant equipment. So we have to maneuver it in by hand. And that's the most strenuous part. And then there's the heat, of course. Andre, now we'll cut off another small piece.
If Peter and his colleagues don't work accurately here, doors and windows will jam later. In the worst case, even the windows could crack. The window fitters use spacers to bring the parts into position.
We had to bring the elements in here. We had to assemble them because these elements are divided into 4 parts. And we didn't have that much space here, so we couldn't build a bridge because of the supports, scaffolding and everything. So we had to try a little harder, but we managed. And with the element, with the sliding door system, we even have 5 parts, but it works. So where there's a will, there's a way. Tighten the string on the screw, Mark.
In the lower area, the men work with a plumb line to straighten the windows. This is important in order to get them tight later on.
Okay, pull tight.
The window fitters work in almost any weather, not just when it's hot like today.
Yes, rain, snow, sub-zero temperatures. You can't do a lot of waterproofing, for example, if the temperature is below -5 or above +40. Then the mass, the adhesives and so on, melt or freeze. And then you can no longer carry out such work. You also no longer guarantee the tightness and just the execution. But the heat is extreme. You also have to make sure that you drink enough. That's what we do. We always have a crate of water with us. That's very important.
Underneath the house, Adam Sven Fokiotis has been working for days. The carpenter is making the exterior formwork. Sven turns 800 screws a day into the wood. Here, it was particularly important to attach the timbers in a line.
I now actually only have to make sure that the gaps are reasonably even. I push back and forth with the screwdriver and make it tight.
Sven has started on the outside and is working his way into the middle. Since the house is oval, it gets tighter and tighter for him. He has to be very careful.
Yoga, worksite yoga. Stretching somewhere on the support every now and then, and maybe again after work. And I've actually been doing that fairly frequently since my lumbago. Yes, right. Otherwise, the classic. Bend your knees and don't lift out of your back. That's very important.
In Annweiler, the treehouse builders continue to climb. In Kassel, the sewer workers are once again looking deep underground. Another sewer inspection is due, this time with a camera. Matthias Popola and Leon Ohrbach clean the canal so that the camera can see something.
rat infestation. Over time, you can see what these rat droppings look like, and then you can see that there are rats in there, so to speak. They're mostly on top of the banks and they're in the water below.
The rat problem will be taken care of later by colleagues. Matthias and Leon lower the cleaning nozzle. In addition to the front nozzle, it has side nozzles on a rotating ring. This allows the entire pipe to be cleaned. Also the sleeves, which the inspectors want to take a close look at. After that, the powerful suction hose is lowered.
It's like a vacuum cleaner, just like at home, but for liquid waste and for stones and sand, which we bring in with this nozzle. And since this vehicle is a water purifier, we use the water that we suck up again as rinse water, which is flushed out again.
That makes sense, because the sewer cleaners use 330 liters of water per minute with this vehicle.
The work is now completed. Let's go to the next part and rinse it for the camera.
Like any work, the men documented this job. Shortly thereafter, the sewer is cleaned spotless. The two sewer cleaners can move on to the next manhole. Now it's the turn of the colleagues here. Anyone who wants to become a sewer worker needs at least a good secondary school diploma, satisfactory grades in science, physical fitness, and an interest in technology. The camera operators stand one gully ahead.
We run to the camera now, the people who do the camera drive, and then we let them know that we're out of the bottom of the pipe, that they can drive in with the camera. We want to avoid collisions with the nozzle and the camera because that would cause damage. That's why we usually let them know that we're done, that they can then go in with the camera.
Sewer workers should also be team players.
Hello, you two. Everything good? We're ready. You can start.
Oliver Kerl prepares the camera for use. The device costs 75,000 euros.
In the worst case, the camera could slip off the hook. That would be the worst case. And we have to pay attention that the camera, the head in front, doesn't strike anywhere, because the camera head is very sensitive. You can turn on the light, and we're going to insert it into the shaft here, and then we're going to insert it into the pipe.
According to the self-monitoring ordinance, the wastewater company is obliged to inspect its sewers at regular intervals for environmental protection reasons. Before the camera can start, Oliver has to set the marker for the length counter. That way, the experts will later know where there is possible damage.
Now I tighten the cable, and now 1.90 meters. Ollie, can I go back a little?
Okay.
Colleague André Florian sits in the vehicle and controls the camera. If something is leaking here, the expert will notice. The sewer being inspected has more than 60 years under its belt.
We can now look at the sleeve here. Looks very nice. Then it's also a sequence to the next sleeve. And here at this point we now have a slight backwater, where the water basically stops in the channel. And these are such places where it could then lead to a blockage. And that's a spot now that we're documenting, as there's water in there.
However, the canal workers don't yet have to take action here.
We even have visitors now, since we have the documentation of the rat infestation in live. I actually like them. I just don't want to have them around the feet. But with the camera from a distance, they're cute. I find nothing wrong with them.
Nevertheless, the rat will have to bite the dust later, before it becomes a real plague here.
Not yet. It's still curious. Comes to meet us. They're basically afraid of water. That's why they always walk along the edge. They don't like wet feet.
Rats are not the only animals the canal workers encounter in their work. Andre looks at a video he made during a previous sewer inspection.
Just a nice example of why Kassel is called the city of raccoons. You also encounter something like that. It's a highlight. We also like to record such things. And these are video sequences that we can then keep.
This channel is in good condition.
We're done. You can pull back. I'm switching over.
Then Benny and his colleagues arrive on the scene.
In the next shaft, you can put out a little rat poison. We had some rats here.
One last job, only then is at the end of the day. Rat control is a common job for sewer workers. This is because too many people dispose of food scraps in the toilet. A floating tank in the bait box prevents the poison from coming into contact with the wastewater during heavy rain.
I go home with a good feeling, with a clear conscience. My work is done. The day was short, it was fun, the weather was good. And then tonight at the dinner table, I'll tell my wife and child what I've done. I'm looking forward to a hot shower.
A shower is part of the working day for the sewer workers. And so Torsten, Benny and Alex later go home tired, satisfied and freshly showered. Brunsbüttel, cleanliness is just as important at the former nuclear power plant. The complete construction debris must survive several radiation protection measurements. Initial measurement, orientation measurement, clearance measurement. All data are precisely documented.
The colleagues wearing green suits, that's the radiation protection team. That is for our own protection. They are here on site to look over the shoulders of our colleagues and to make sure that radiation protection is being observed everywhere. In case of doubt, they can also stop any work if it's dangerous and say, put on protective equipment again, or we have to clean up here once. That's why they have their measuring device with them. And with it, they always check everything. And in case of doubt, they can close off an area and say, we have to put up a shield here first. But you can see that they are relaxed up here, because it's quite clean.
Everything's in order here. The complete material is transported in the red skips. Katja decides which parts are disposed of and how. This cooler, like most parts in the nuclear power plant, does not have to go into the final repository.
We have a cooler here which needs to be dismantled. The important thing for me is to check whether the cooler can be dismantled. That's the orange marking here. It tells me that this is shut down, that the cooler can be removed. The second thing that's important to me is the pink marking. It tells me exactly that the cooler has been radiologically characterized and to which nuclide vector it has been assigned. So I know exactly with which other material it can be dismantled and processed.
The inner tubes must have their coating removed before further processing. The large outer pipe is crushed with the bandsaw and taken out in individual parts by crane. Then the parts are sawed into smaller pieces. Katja stops by the orientation measurement, her department, but she can't go in there like that.
These are overshoes because the room here is very clean and we don't want to bring in any dirt from outside. That's why I have to put on clean overshoes. Hi there.
The colleagues measure pulses per second at the surface. Each pulse is a radioactive decay. Anything above the specified limit is not allowed to leave the controlled area and is decontaminated again.
I set that now, and then when I measure now, I have to have the 75% overlapping. I set that now, and then it's measured for 30 seconds, and then the average value is determined, and the device shows it.
The radiation protection experts need 15 minutes for such a part. They mark the grids they have already gone through on the component. Not all parts are easy to examine.
This is a relatively easy part here, but sometimes there are a few bends in it and so on, which is more difficult. Then you have to see if it's still possible to measure it at all. The distance mustn't be too high. For example, over there. That is not measurable. That is now only geometry or color residue.
There is rarely an alarm. Nevertheless, it doesn't get boring.
It's also interesting. It's not a simple workplace. You also have to think about many things and so on. You can't just blindly do anything. That's why it's interesting.
All parts that survive the orientation measurement leave the control area and are measured free once again.
And once everything has been measured well, when the colleague is completely finished with the piece, it goes into these wire mesh boxes. And this is exactly the unit that will later be measured free. So everything that is actually dismantled in this power plant goes into a grid box like this. And this is how it is measured free.
Katja and her colleagues will be employed here for at least another 15 years. When there is nothing left of the power plant, Katja's job will be done. But there's still a lot to do before that happens. There is also still a lot to do in Anweiler. The window fitters want to glaze the front.
No need to do that. No? Can you move the construction fence? The blanket's away.
6 window panes at a temperature of 35 degrees Celsius.
We covered the glass deliberately so that they wouldn't get so hot. If they're exposed to the sun for a long time, they get so hot that you can no longer touch them. And that's not nice when you're installing them.
Triple glazed. In the past, such panes were lighter.
And now up. 3, 2, 123 kilos.
The path to the house is still reasonably easy. Nevertheless, the window builders have to be careful not to bump into anything now. Then it becomes more complicated. The glass must be tinkered through the narrow door.
How do we take these? From below? Quite careful. Sharp edges, warm glass. 3, 2, 1.
Now it's on.
Watch your fingers. Put it down. Down, down. Careful the ceiling.
Vorsicht die Decke.
Careful. Down. Okay.
The strong pump suction cups hold up to 80 kilos each. A lot can go wrong.
Take a wrong grip and then let it drop. Then it looks like this. You have to be careful now. Let's go for it, Michael. 3, 2. Go on, a little more. You're too small. My dad pulled me by the ears. That's why I'm so big. You were always a nice boy, so he didn't have to be pulled by the ears. Make sure you get it at the bottom. 3, 2, and in.
For now, the window fitters are only putting the glass in place temporarily. After glazing, the windows still get the plug-in rubber seal. Then the windows are fixed.
It's standing, Michael. You don't need it anymore. You can let go.
Kannst du loslassen.
Pane number 1 is done. The blocks hold the glass in position. Then comes the second pane. This one is almost identical. And so the men also get this window pane into the house in one piece.
Runter, runter, runter.
Surely something breaks sometimes.
Quite often it can't be avoided. After all, it is glass. And you have to reach somewhere or place it wrongly. That's when a pane can break. But we can still replace it.
Aber noch können wir austauschen. Gleich rein?
Ja.
Straight in? Okay.
Things are about to get even more complicated. The entrance door will be glazed.
For moving elements, you glaze the pane or block the pane for sure. Plaster?
Ist okay?
Is it okay? You see, it can happen that quickly. His foot hit the corner of the glass somewhere and he cut himself a little. We have to be extremely careful with glass.
Bei Glas extrem aufpassen.
Together, the men get the pane in. Shortly thereafter, the door is also glazed. In with the rubber seal, then the men are done for today. Site manager Bernd Hook looks at what he and his colleagues have accomplished. For today, he's satisfied. Several trades have worked well together.
The remaining work is now being done. That is, the ceiling boarding is being finished. The floor will also be installed in the next few days. And the terrace will be sealed by the roofers using foil technology. Then an oak floor will go up there. Oak planks, 145 millimeters wide. The handrail is already there and will then be finally installed. And then there's only little remaining work to be done.
The window fitters will have to come back again. Due to delivery problems, they could not glaze all windows yet. There is a wooden emergency pane here.
Every object makes me proud. Every single one. I've been doing this for 32 years, including my training, and I've never done anything else, and don't want to do anything else. Therefore, every object that you finish, which somehow has a special style, is different, makes you proud. When you see from the beginning, oh God, we still have to get there. And then at the end you're there, then it's not bad. Yes, it's always a pleasure.
A few weeks later, the house on stilts is ready and waiting for its first visitors.